Mojica. I'm the executive director for NALCUP, and I appreciate everyone making the time today to be with us today. I am going to introduce our panelists: Creighton Blackwell from Coastal Credit Union, Sue Cuevas from Nueva Esperanza, Tanita Webb, and Pablo De Filippi. If we're gonna kick it off with a very strong question here, and this is going to be with all the panelists. I will call your name as I see you, and then you can share your answer to this one. So can you share your personal journey and experiences as a leader of color in the credit union industry? What unique challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them? And I'm gonna pick on Pablo first because he's my board member. Pablo, kick us off.
Hola, hola, hello everyone. I mean, this is when you talk about journey, I can go back to the times I had hair. And that's a good indication of the struggle in so many ways. You know, when we talk about our movement, our industry, you know, what we see today is so different than what we saw 20 years ago. And not to say that it's perfect, but we've made a lot of progress. When I started my involvement with credit unions, I felt totally invisible. You know, I would go to a conference, you know, and I was like the only person, the only Latino, you know, in many of these places, and felt out of place. That's the reality. Felt that we were not even welcome, you know, in many ways. And maybe that was perception, but, you know, when people don't see you, don't acknowledge you, you know, it's not a great place to be. But we've made progress. And if we just think about GAC, for those of you who have been going to GAC, you know, you can see the change there. You can see how much more diverse it's become, but it hasn't been something that just happened. It happened because of people like all of us that were participating and putting pressure and bringing others, you know, so we could actually create a safe place where we felt seen, where we felt our voices projected and understood, you know. So being a person of color in this country has always been challenging, you know, even more so in our movement. But I'm happy to say that things have changed. We matter. I think that there's, you know, also yes, the reality of the fact that the country has changed, right? Yes, in one more generation, this is going to be a majority minority country. So as an industry, as a movement, we have to realize that we have to change and we have to reflect the communities we serve. So I'm happy that we are seeing that movement.
Great. I'll kick it to you next.
All right. Yes. And once again, good afternoon to everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're calling from. It's always an interesting question because I came in the credit union space about 13 years ago, and I had already had 16 years in working in banking and working in leadership at global regional banks. And I had already gotten used to being one of the only faces of color throughout leadership. It wasn't anything new to me. I'd already had to learn, how do you adapt? How do you continue to move on? How do you continue to represent all of the things that may not be represented in that room? I'd learned that. And when I came to the credit union movement, and I had a great manager who had been in credit unions before, had now moved to credit unions, and he kept telling me all about these principles and all about these values. And when I finally said, you know something, I think that's me, I'm going to join, I had an expectation that those values was going to immediately transfer over, and all of a sudden I'm going to see all of these different things. My surprise is that it wasn't that different. When I first started this journey, I was like, So it's very interesting if you're sharing all these values, but from a representation standpoint, There is much work to still be done. And that made me take a step back. Now, because I was somewhat already used to it, and I could now say, you know something, in this case, some of those things I had to learn early in my professional career, I had to do now, but now I'm gonna use these values offensively, not defensively. And my journey had to become, how do we inspire others now? Because we now bring a different exposure. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on, but the exposure that we bring organically started changing more because you had the values to be your backbone. You had these values to be able to push you on. And if at the very least you had those values to guilt others into what we should be doing and what we say we are. And my journey has been going back and forth with that. It has been building another foundation, building another connection, building another strategy that had to expose people to some things that in many cases, and it wasn't for malintent, they didn't know, simply were not familiar, but we were still behind these same values, and we were behind autonomy and independence that made us all say, okay, we can be different, but we still aiming at these same places. Well, how are we going to do that? Are we doing that? Or is it just us talking and saying that? Because it's a great PR line to be able to say some of those things. Are we living it? To see over these 13 years now with that type of thought process and others. And, you know, I've watched people like on this call who everyone here I'm so appreciative of, because those are people who through my journey, I watched them. I saw what they were doing. And that's another leadership position now I could plug in to now expose those people to my network. And I see how to organically continue to grow. So is it hard? Yes. Is it supposed to be hard? Yes. Is it rewarding? Yes. Because we got that much more to go on the journey. So that's just a little bit of how I've really looked at it and continue to prosper and move throughout this journey that we're on.
Thank you, Creighton. And, you know, I've learned so much from you, and I know we'll speak a little bit on that in the upcoming question, but thank you so much for that answer. Sue? Oh, where you are muted.
I think I was muted. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. You know, my personal journey, obviously my credit union personal journey started 14 years ago next month. So I'll be celebrated in New York also 14 years ago when I was asked if I wanted to start up the one and only Latino credit union in Ohio. And prior to that, I had 30 years of being VP, you know, over lending, over various positions that I worked my way up because, you know, back in the 70s, so that kind of throws in a little bit of my age, you know, you didn't see specifically women, especially Latina women, taking a role of any type of vice president or being in a position of management. So I can't say that I really had a strong journey. And the reason I say that is because I grew up in a Hispanic family home where our beliefs were always, you can do anything that you set your mind to do, and you can do just about anything that anybody else can do. So we could never have an excuse from my parents. You know, if so-and-so got a B, why did you get a C? Because you still have the same brain cells. I mean, I heard it through my whole. So and then I instilled that in my children. Don't come to me and tell me you can't do it. So-and-so did it, then you're going to have to try. So, you know, the challenge wasn't so much that I didn't feel I could do it. I think the challenge was proving that as a female Latina in more of a male dominated world, and I'm talking about years and years ago, you know, that had to be proven. So you had to prove more, you know, not only that you could do the job, but that you deserve, you know, the pay that you were actually going to be actually needing. So 14 years ago, when they asked me to start the credit union, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm just giving this a year just to be nice. I'm going to say yes. Well, 14 years later, the passion has grown and, and exceeds above anything I could ever do. Have there been challenges starting up a credit union? Absolutely. I remember one of the board members that was interviewing, they said, well, I don't know if a woman is a good fit for this role. I really think that we need to have a male. And, to me, it was like, hey, I'm only giving you a year anyway. It doesn't really matter. Like that was in the back of my mind. I'm like, needless to say, he is no longer on the board, right? I'm Nueva Esperanza, and I'm still here 14 years later. So there have been challenges because sometimes people will try to limit your capabilities. So you've had to, exceed those, maybe prove more than what you should. Not because you need to, but because you want to, because you want people to know, I can do this, so what? I'm the only Latina, so what? This is something that I hope other women are inspired, to do themselves, to be in management positions, to open up small credit unions and to be able to help the community and to serve in that capacity. So, yes, there have been many, many, many challenges during the 14 years, but they've been a challenge for growth, and growth is good, and change is good. So I think like everybody else on the panel, we've gone through different scenarios, our backgrounds, our limitations, or even in our own mind, what we think we can and can't do, because that plays really heavy on a lot of us. But I say, we can do this. And if we can't do it, during these 14 years, somebody asked me, why do you always go to those conferences? Well, I'll tell you why, because these conferences like Inclusive have supported the small credit union in so many ways that I can. So I've had people helping me along the way. So even though there have been some challenges, maybe internally, the ability to network with people that know how to help and that are willing to help, that really can take you a long way. So I guess that's kind of my saying on that.
Oh, I love that story, Sue. And I'll never forget when I met you at Inclusive. We were riding the bus and you told me about how you started the credit union. And I've admired you since then. So thank you so much for paving.
It was just for those that don't know, I did start out of the trunk of my car. I didn't know any better. Would I do it again? I don't know. But I didn't know any better. I had a printer in my copier and I would just approach people and say, hey, we're opening the first Latino credit union in Ohio. I need your driver's license. I need $5 and I want you to be part of the first elite 100 people, 100 members. And they were like, okay. And now I'm thinking, boy, that was gutsy, right? But when you have a passion to do something, really nothing's going to stop you.
Mhm.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. So thank you for that, Barbara.
Yes, I admire your story so much. Ms. Tanita, your turn.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm on the West Coast, so it's still morning for us. I've had 2 cups of coffee, so I'm ready. I'm good to go. My story comes from a representation perspective. When I came into the credit union industry, which was almost about 20 years ago, I was fortunate enough to my first CEO, which was really rare in the Pacific Northwest, was a Black male. So from the get, I saw what may be possible. And I want you to know, I didn't come into the credit union thinking I would be a CEO. I was hired as the HR manager. And seeing Bob as my CEO made me think, and he questioned and he mentored me. He would ask me questions like, what are you going to do with your career? And I thought, well, I'm coming here to do a good job. What do you mean? What am I going to do with my career? But what it did, it made me think about, am I capable of doing something more, right? Helping me overcome that imposter syndrome. as I was spoiled because I got to see other African-American, we had a African-American CFO every day. But then as I went out into the industry, I didn't see much representation. I didn't see much representation in our local community, in our credit union. That is changing. That is different, but there's still more work to do. As I got involved with some of the organizations, AACUC, I got more mentors who told me what was possible. I got folks who showed me how to be my authentic self, as well as teaching me the ropes. And I'm so passionate about, as I've made it to CEO, holding that door open for others, because my mentors opened that door for me. And it's so important that we mentor, we sponsor other folks, because I have a whole list of folks who understood the value of representation in our industry. It's so important that you have a place to come and see other folks who share your history or may look like you be able to be successful. I can't say that I grew up in an environment that told me, yeah, I was going to be a CEO or I was going to have the education that I was going to have. Seeing those other folks in the industry, even though it was just a few, allowed me to see what is possible. It is, often especially for larger credit unions, often you hear folks say, well, we couldn't find anybody that's qualified. If you're in a large credit union, I throw shade at that, right? There are people that are qualified, and it's up to us to be able to bring more people into the industry. If your executive team or your employee group doesn't represent your community, then there's more work for us to do, because at a larger credit union, we have resources. And I love Sue's view on a smaller credit union. And what that did for me is, what can we be doing more to help smaller credit unions achieve goals in the DEI realm? I just cannot say enough about representation. And I think my journey has been that I have had folks along my way to show me that I matter, I deserve to be there, and to help me navigate the waters.
Love those. Love, love, love. Any additional comments from the other panelists? No?
Just one comment about, not finding qualified people. That's an excuse that we hear so many times, and it really says so much about this perception that somehow minority people are less capable of, and also the reality is that many of the HR networks are not connected to, schools or colleges that are serving more Latinos and African Americans, So of course, if you don't look in the right place, you're not going to find the people in the first place, right? So, yep, I just wanted to add that.
Hey, let me add this point. And that was an excellent point you just pulled out, with the assumption that minorities or others are not qualified in many cases. Well, normally, what's the opposite end of that point? It's the opposite end that others must be qualified to be in that, which there are various times when that's not necessarily the correct assumption. In part, as we've gone through this journey, has been, in many cases, it's been you performing at such a level. Why? Because you don't have that. You tackled that imposter syndrome. You had that security. You did the training. Your performance is so much that it could not be denied. And all of a sudden, how we now define qualifications starts changing. And whenever you see those qualifications now start changing, all of a sudden you can now see and find those people that you didn't think you could find, because it made you have to look and say, what is real equity? Right? What is it? If we are all here that said we're here for the betterment of all of our members and communities, then should we not be looking for the best? Should we not have those qualified people and leaders at the spots that we need them? That's when we're talking about this journey and how we continue to go. That's where we got to continue to push. That's where we got to continue to show. But that's where we all have to be able to establish our credibility and our qualifications to stand in these positions and sustain these positions to a point where we can no longer be denied that leadership position is the one that you have. I hear those stories in everything that you all are saying.
Love that. We have a question from the audience, by the way. Any tips that have helped you to combat imposter syndrome? Who wants to take it away?
I can start. For me, I'm going to be honest, and I think this is an ongoing journey until we make more change in the world, because there's still a dominant culture, if you will. So I'm going to be honest, I have to talk to myself, right? Because those feelings come up at times. And to Clayton's point, we've done everything that we're supposed to do, right? We have the right education. We've had the right jobs. We've done all the things that work, and then we'll still doubt ourselves. So I'll say to myself, I'll talk to myself and say, why can't I do that? Who said I can't do it? And does their word matter to me? And why does it matter to me? And those are conversations I have to myself on a regular basis. I list out my accomplishments, right? So I'll say to myself, well, how many degrees do you have to have before you feel like you're qualified, right? And I have enough of them, right? And so I have to remind myself of who I am, not who they said I was, but who I am. And so those are conversations I have on a regular basis.
I love that. Anybody else wants to take a jab on that?
I think the important thing, for a lot of us, we do limit, like you said, Tanita, we do limit ourselves in the capabilities that we are able to do. And so you're right. I have to talk to myself. I do that quite often, just in case y'all didn't know that. But anyway, I have to kind of like pump myself up, and I have to start off the day believing that I can accomplish anything that is thrown at me and that I'm going to make a difference. And when I do that in my mind, then I'm able to function a lot better, because, as small CEOs, we wear so many different types of hats and jackets and everything. And so you're very unprepared for the day. I mean, you may have a member rep, I call them my team, one of them call in sick, and then I'm on the teller line. So that just threw off everything that I had planned. But in the back of my mind, it's, I can do this and I'm doing it. So the purpose of why you're doing it creates I want to do it. Okay. So it's really the purpose of why you're doing it that pushes you to excel and to do everything that you possibly can and need to do.
Can I throw this point in also? And I'm going to also get on the line of saying, yes, I talk to myself too, and then go through those affirmations. But I think it's important, especially when we talk about everyone that's on this call, talking to yourself and those affirmations are important, but also talking to others. What's your support group? What are the different places that you go that can also give you that reinforcement because they've seen you do amazing things. In many cases, if we simply isolate ourselves, we isolate ourselves from an amazing network. We're on a network right now that has reinforced and told many of us, you all do amazing things. And how do you now convert that energy, that positive energy, to now you looking in that mirror when you're looking at yourself and says, you know something, you're right. I can. You know why? Because Barbara told me I could. Tanita told me I could. Like being able to use these networks, that's why this is so important. That's why this organization is so important, so many, because it gives us all another reinforcement of the impact you can make on whatever your job is, with whatever you're asked to do daily. These folks, these people, this group is here to do that. So I think it's so important that use the networks that are actually there to support you. They're there to support you.
But vice versa, and I love that point. I mean, the reaffirmation is important, the networking is important, not only to find support, but to support others. I think that, as I said at the beginning, we are in a much better place that we were, 20 years ago. We still have a long way to go, but we see a lot of new leaders coming up. And I think that our own responsibility is to make sure that this not only carries on, but it grows, right, across the movement. We have now, I mean, we've had ACUC for a while, NALCAP for a while, but now we have CU Pride, we have Happy Cup. I mean, think about these, networks that are coming up that give us that connection, that opportunity to be supported, but to support, to belong, but also to bring others to it. Being a member of ACUC or NALCAP or CU Pride, you don't have to be Black or Latino or gay. This is about building community and helping us connect with each other. And I think that that's the other part of this, right? It's not just finding support, but supporting and opening the door for the next generation. Because if we don't do that, we're gonna be, our movement will fail.
Oh, I love that. And I just wanted to add, if I can, that, as a young person in leadership, I look up to you all for that reassurance when I'm having that imposter syndrome. So I wanted to also say for the audience out there, and especially those senior, those persons that have been in leadership for so long, is like the importance of pushing your staff, especially that younger generation and people of color, to see what they can't see in themselves. Because I was very young, 23 years old, when Creighton saw something in me that I really did not see, and it was through his mentorship and leadership that I was able to grow into who I am now professionally. So I just wanted to say that, to push you all to continue encouraging us to, that we are here and that we belong and that we do deserve to be in these positions. So thank you for that. And I want to move on to this next question because I think it's super important. How can credit unions ensure that their leadership development programs are accessible and equitable for individuals from underrepresented groups? Pablo, I'm gonna let you kick this one off.
I've run into a lot of people who have incredible potential. They tell me, I don't get to go out. I don't have an opportunity to go to a conference. And that's really a big missed opportunity, not only for that individual, but for the credit union and also for us as a movement. We are in a country that is changing so rapidly, in spite of narratives, that want to deny that reality. We're changing, and we need to be ready for this change. And as an industry, we're not ready. We are so not diverse that is almost shameful. You know, you look at the leadership not only of credit unions, you look at board of directors, you look at the entities that represent our movement, and they're not diverse, you know. And when you don't have that lens, you know, of course you're going to say, well, who gets to go to these places, who gets the opportunities, are not going to be minority people. They're going to be just people like the people who are making decisions today. I'm going to call out Jeff Ivey because I see him here. He's on the board of Inclusive, but Jeff, you know, journey, you know, is part of the recognition that the best way to grow your credit union is to do what you Tonita were saying, is to make sure that we are reflecting the community we serve. And Jeff has really made an amazing job in his credit union in River City in San Antonio, where he's really, you know, been able to create leadership at a level that before wasn't there, before he went to that credit union. So we have to be, we leaders, you know, we need to recognize that this is not, these decisions will determine, you know, not only the future of our own institutions, but our future, our relevance as a movement in the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ms. Sue, would you like to add some?
Yeah, well, you know, credit unions are rapidly growing. You know, they rapidly are. And along with that growth, you know, our leadership programs have to be built around the growth of our credit unions. And, you know, my thoughts are that sometimes, you know, we need to send them. I totally agree. Sometimes we need to send them to conferences so they can see the big picture, so they can come back inspired. I share this with you because it's a small credit union with just 3 employees. You know, yes, we're community involved, and we see our members, and we love them, and we know what's going on in their lives. But behind a teller doesn't really give them the emphasis of going to an inclusive, you know, conference where they see all of these people sharing in the same type of desires. And so sometimes, you know, we have to step forward as leaders and say, you know what, I see this potential in this person. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send her to a conference, not just a class, not just an online class. I need her to network with others, you know, the employees, the member service, the loan officers, you know, everybody, because I think that really deepens their desire to grow. And after all, that's why you have them employed, because you see in them something that they can contribute, right? So continue that, you know, give them those leadership skills, but don't always give it to them in a workbook format. Because sometimes, you know, I mean, you can tell me how that, you know, how that drink tastes, but unless I'm tasting it, I can't respond to it. And I think that's the way it is with, and this is my personal opinion, you know, I try to get them involved. I try to get them to go. I try to let them see what we're participating in. And it would be really nice, you know, to be able to say, hey, you know, because of these larger credit unions, I have some grant funds that allow me to take 2 of my employees, you know. But those are my thoughts on leadership mentoring. Sometimes, I mean, the vision and the strategy, that's good, but until you see it and you experience it, you know, once you go to inclusive, you just don't ever want to stop. It's like an
Yes.
addiction, you know, you just network. So those are just my views on it.
I love that, Sue. And, you know, as someone that came into the industry thinking I would just gonna do loans, you know, for the rest of my life. And when I was given the opportunity to crash GHC, that's really when I opened my eyes to these credit unions and the world of credit unions. So it's so important to continue pouring into those individuals that, you know, are doing a little bit more than just opening a loan, right? Or even if they are, like, that is the next step forward to make it passionate.
Right.
Movement. So I love that. Miss Tamita, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would say I agree with everything Sue said. And if you're bringing employees to conferences and events, make sure you make connections for them, right? Introduce them to people, because one of the things that had allowed me to move forward was my CEO did that. He made connections for me, and that allowed me to do what I call my personal board of directors, right? And so these were people that was introduced to me by someone else, and I asked them, would they be available for occasional questions or some sort of mentorship? And as I navigated the credit union space, it helped me hone in to what I enjoyed about the work. And I realized, yes, I care about people. I still care about HR, but I care about the overall movement. And I want to be a part of that movement. And I didn't come up with that by myself. It was someone connected me to others to be able to pour into me. I also want to say I receive scholarships to go to certain things. So I get it. Resources are slim for a lot of credit unions, especially in this economic conditions. There are a lot of scholarships. Go to your association or leads, or like Sue said, other large credit unions are giving grants. And if your CEO or your supervisor hasn't thought about that, tell them about it. Find it, bring it up to them. And those of you that are leaders, that is a possibility. It is no reason why any of us cannot send someone for development and growth.
Right.
Yeah, I can't help but as I listen to everybody think of the word intentionality. And that there has to be intentionality from the leadership, the organization, as to what is your strategy, whether it's your development is about employment engagement, whether it's about, building into strengths in the spaces that you've assessed that you don't have, whether it's about trying to control turnover, you don't want a turnover cost. What's the intentionality from an organizational standpoint, but then the intentionality of the individual? Right, what are we looking to do with this development that we're getting? When we're opening ourselves up, how do we now look at our different opportunities that we have in those special talents that may fit into some of those institutions, those opportunities? So I look at that and then say, I've heard these debates over the years with leadership, and I've heard some in leadership that would say that's 100% on the individual. What did that individual go do on their own to build that? Right. And I've heard individuals say, what did the organization do for me to be able to do that? And it seems to me that one of the more powerful ways is when it's shared. Right. When that intentionality is built on it, shared, so that when we decide, okay, yes, we want to intentionally send you to this conference to be able to build, but it doesn't stay just on you. And when the conference ends, right, and all of a sudden, your development happened in a 2-month span, it wasn't continual, it wasn't shared, it wasn't looked at the same way, so that there's benefits for you, the employee, the company itself, everyone you're touching, your membership, your community, your eligible membership. All of those can kind of now see when you have your talent and your leadership now saying, no, this responsibility is all of ours to build all of our talent, all our development, and not stop. Development is not something that should have a date on it. There's no expiration date. This is what we should do in every level of the organization. And that's up to from teller to CEO to board member. Every element of this should be on a shared journey to continue to develop. Why? Because our members need that type of change, that type of development, that type of growth for us to be able to say we are the ones who are serving them the best. We can't do that if we don't have that kind of shared responsibility and intentionality.
I love that. We have two questions from the audience. One of them reads, what are credit unions leaders doing to ensure that frontline team members are aware of networks that look like them? Are we as leaders tapping in internally and sharing our NowCup, AAC, CCU, Pride, and more affiliations? And Pablo, I'll let you take it away, and then we can pass it on to someone else. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think that there's a big gap between frontline people or emerging leaders and opportunities outside the credit unions. I don't think that many credit unions really have very formalized plans to expose those people to networks where they can, empower themselves and network. I mean, one of the biggest values that we all have is the value of the people we know, the people we trust. And if that's denied from people who are emerging as leaders, we are really delaying that development significantly. And let's really think about what that means for the institution. We are depriving ourselves from talent that has potential that may never be fulfilled if we don't give those opportunities. When we talk about diversity and our lack of purpose or intentionality, as Craig was saying it, what we're doing is that when we don't have a diverse workforce in our shops, then we have a handicap. And let me just put you an example. Say that you are serving a primarily Latino community and your staff is not Latino. What happens is that you look at this community with distrust because you don't know the community. And with distrust comes what? The perception of risk. And when you have a lender who attaches risk to something that is not just numbers or credit reports, but just to an individual. And I know that this is kind of gray line because it's never is not written, right? But that really creates a big problem because people who are Latino, who are African Americans, get denied at a much higher rate than other people. And if we think about who's denying them, who's denying them, right? So if we have a more diverse workforce in our credit unions, that problem is solved. Not completely, because we have structural issues that make it hard for minorities to be evaluated, in lending decisions more equitable, but at least we can look at the lending side and have people who really understand the community. That eliminates one of those friction points.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ms. Sue, would you like to add anything to those questions?
I think I totally agree with Pablo. It does make a difference who you have on the front line to serve the people that strictly walk in. For example, my dad, he came from Mexico at the age of 8 years old, and he can speak it, read it, write it. But if you hand him, if he sees a, just to use the word in general, as a member service rep or as a teller that's Hispanic, and versus one that is not, he's automatically going to go that way because he assumes that they can help him in a language barrier. Okay, it may not even be the knowledge because they both have the same knowledge, but it's, oh, she might be able or he might be able to understand me in Spanish. And it's the same thing that happens. You give him a brochure in English or in Spanish, he's going to take the one in Spanish. So sometimes the front line here in Ohio, I mean, I've been addressed so many times, how do you serve the Latino population? We recently just opened up a lending office 3 hours away in Columbus, Ohio. And, they're constantly asking me, how do you do that? I go, do you have a bilingual teller? Well, no. I go, well, get yourself one. because that's what people want on the front line. And that's just everywhere you go. African American, Asian, whatever. It's just the front line that's going to be able to draw the people, and that's serving your community. That's really serving your community. You can't get pizza from Kentucky Fried Chicken, So when they come in, and especially us, we're a bilingual, team, but it'd be really hard for someone who comes in and has a hard time understanding English if I only have those that don't speak Spanish. So you're right, it's very important. Your frontline team is very important. The same thing with lending, I don't need them to bring in a 6 or 7-year-old, 8-year-old to translate. I need to get myself someone that's qualified to help them understand, so I think that's important.
I love that because, I was that child translating at 8 years old and not knowing what I was saying to my parents half of the time. So I love that. Creighton, do you want to add?
Just very quickly and easily, because it's been said perfectly. Your front line is the face of your organization.
Mm-hmm.
How you manage and develop and present your front line is how you're presenting who you are as a credit union. Those are the people that are the ones who are touching all of your members. And we can talk about percentages as you see more and more go to digital and things of that nature, but who do they then go back and ask the questions to? Who is it that when they want lending, they want to have that call? If you're not investing in your front line, are you truly serving the way your community needs to be served, the way your membership needs to be served, or are you serving the way you decided you wanted to serve your members? Because sometimes those are two different things. And if we are going back, I keep coming back to the principles, and I keep coming back to the values, because who we have said that we are is about true service of all of those members. Your front line represents that in the best way that it can be served. So even how we're connecting these conversations and we're saying who is one of the biggest elements, in many cases, they're not calling me up to say, hey, Creighton Blackwell, can you help me with this loan? That's not what's happening. It's the front line. And how we put that emphasis on them and continue to develop and build and really intentionally understand how do we serve through them. We will still have a little bit more on this journey we got to get to really get the growth that we always talk about and always really.
Love that. Miss Tamira?
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said. And we've talked a lot about having representation. You also need to be intentional once you hire diversity. Have you created a space that is safe? Do they have psychological safety? Are your policies aligned? We all know it's the right thing to do, but sometimes we don't look at our process, our procedures, our policies to make sure they don't undo everything that you've done, to make sure that while you have all the representation, they're too afraid to talk to you about the changes that they see from the community. So I think that's really important too, that we bring folks in, different people, and I think that's a great thing. And we need to make sure our policies represent what we're trying to do.
I love that. We have another question from the audience, and now let Ms. Sue take this one. What do you do to let your members know that you have frontline bilingual associates before they have a chance to speak together face to face? What do your marketing efforts look like?
Okay, well, literally when you walk in, you're going to know they're Hispanic. They're going to know they're Latinos or Latinas. I mean, seriously. The other thing is that, and we are, our credit union is open to everyone, not just Latinos. One of the nice things that, that my front line will say, Inglés o en español. So English or in Spanish? Oh, habla español. You talk Spanish? Yes. Okay. And then they come, oh, why prefer English? Because, you know, there's a lot of Hispanics that don't speak the language, you know? I mean, some look like it, but so, you know, what would you prefer? The same thing when we answer our phone. You know, Nueva Esperanza Community Credit Union, how can I help you? ¿Cómo le puedo ayudar? You know, so it gives the member a chance to respond. Oh, you speak Spanish. Oh, yes. So that's how it works for us. Now, I don't, you know, as far as our marketing, our brochures, you know, we also have on there, you know, se habla español, we're bilingual. So that's, you know, that's in essence of a smaller credit union for us. Obviously, I'm sure that there are so many others that have, you know, more to contribute on this question, but that's how we do it.
I love that. Yes, 2 days ago we visited Chartway Credit Union, and everything there was also translated into Spanish. And I think that's just one of the efforts that they, you know, credit unions can make to say like, hey, we welcome you
Mhm.
because it's all translated, you know. So, Pablo, do you want to add?
Yeah, so translation, when it comes to the Latino community, a lot of people think why it's a huge expense, and the reality is that many Latinos are totally proficient in English, right? But it's a way to tell people we see you and we understand your roots. You decide how you speak to us, but we can speak your language. And I think that that's important. It's a way to validate a population that has been oftentimes, marginalized, that's been, politically, especially by some people who are running for president, so verbally be abused, right? There's all this, narrative about immigrants and Hispanics that needs to change. And it's important for Canadians to send that message that we see you, that we value, that we welcome you. So I love that.
Yeah. Creighton or Donita, any perspectives for your own personal credit unions?
Anita?
So I would just add, I agree with everything everyone has said, and some folks listed some really great ideas in the chat. Also, something really simple is putting what language you speak on your name tag, right? If you're in Seattle, there are a lot of different languages that are spoken here. And so when the person comes up and greet you, they see you speak their language. That is something that has been successful.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add, and I'm going to go back to the old grassroots marketing playbook. And I'm once again going to connect some of the things we have, because if we've gotten the right representation and we now have those that can truly represent these communities, and we're going to have bilingual tellers, and we got some brochures and the right people are speaking, then the grassroots marketing person in me says, now go to those markets. Now go to those communities. Go be a part of them. Just don't show up when you're there to sell your product. Go show up because you authentically want to be a part of that community. And that's how when we talk about differentiation from banks and others, now you're talking about real differentiation and sustainability when you are there to say, no, we are you. We are a part of this. We're not just here to represent these other things. Do not be afraid to take all of these things that we're talking about and put it together. I think too many times we silo things, we isolate them, and then we say they're too hard, so we don't do them. We're all skilled and talented enough to be able to do multiple things at one time. And once again, that's dictated because our membership needs that.
I love that. And I'm a testament to working for you and being part of those communities. So you walk the talk, or you walk the talk, or talk the walk, or whatever that saying is. But To close out this amazing webinar that we had today, I'm going to ask you all a rapid fire question. And that's honestly because I want to know. What advice would you give your younger self? And I'll kick it off to Miss Sue, and then we'll go around the room.
What advice would I give to my way younger self? One of the things that I would have to say is forgive yourself for the mistakes that you will make and that you've made. Because sometimes I think I was really hard on that. And, you know, sometimes we remember, okay, I should have lent them, I shouldn't have lent them, or, you know, but, you know, you're going to make a lot of mistakes in life. And one of them is to forgive and move forward. You know, Sue, don't pretend that you know everything. Always be willing to ask, even at my ripe old age. I can still ask because you can never have enough knowledge. So I think for me, it's like, wow, you know what, Sue? Don't be afraid to ask, and definitely don't dwell on the mistakes that you may have made, because you know, that's just part of it. And never ever give up on something that you truly believe in.
Love that. Miss Tanita?
Same on the mistake side, with a little twist. My mistakes I would tell my younger self, your mistakes will become your greatest lessons. Leverage them, learn from them. It will help you in the future.
Love that. Creighton?
Don't wait to be plucked. And what I mean by that is don't wait for someone else to come and pick you up and put you in a higher position. Work and go after it yourself.
Pablo?
Create a network. I think that, you know, in my early time as a credit union professional, I didn't see how important it was to create a network of people you could